Hello, and welcome to the Coming Soon Ministries podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Brad Reaves, and I'm the senior pastor at Crossway Christian Fellowship in Hagerstown, Maryland, and the director here of Coming Soon Ministries. Today, I have a very special podcast for you. I'm going to be joined by Pete Garcia, an incredible voice and someone that has a lot of insight into what's happening around the world and right here in the United States. Pete comes with a very unique perspective as a longtime military veteran, a helicopter pilot in the U.S. Army, and so much insight as to things that are happening around the globe. Recently, Pete and I did a podcast where we talked about the top 10 2025 events and how those things are converging to usher in the coming of Jesus. Today, we're going to look ahead into 2026 and give you some of our thoughts, maybe some predictions and insights into what could be happening in the world in the next year. Now, this isn't date setting. I want to be clear. We're not trying to set dates. We're not trying to say, thus saith the Lord. What we're doing today is we're just looking into the current climate and saying these are things that could possibly and likely happen this year and how that will influence the church, the world, and what it might mean for the coming of Christ. Before we bring Pete on, I want to encourage you to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also check out our Substack page, comingsoonministries.substack.com, where you'll find articles, videos, and a lot of great information to keep you attuned on what's happening around the world. And of course, don't forget, Abraham to Armageddon, an incredible one-day prophecy conference in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where you'll hear some great voices that will speak into the day's events. August 1st, 2026 in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And if you can't make it to Gettysburg, we will have it streamed online as well. Now, with that, let's bring on Pete. Well, Pete Garcia, good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. We recorded a show, I guess, by the end of early, I don't know when it was, end of 2025.
Yeah.
And we talked about some of the best, most significant events of 2025 and how they were affecting just what we were reviewing in prophecy and the world. And, the audience just loved it. They asked for more. And I said, well, let's do another show. And we're going to look, we're not opening up a crystal ball here or anything, but we're saying what are some of the most influential things that could shape 2026. And I got to tell you, Pete, 2026 is turning out to be a pretty big dumpster fire already.
Yeah. Sure is, man. It's going to be an exciting year, no doubt.
I mean, we got Trump that's just rolling hard onto Venezuela, capturing Maduro. We've got Minnesota that seems like it's its own dumpster fire. Mamdani taking office in New York City, swearing in on the Quran. Iran is I don't know if it's going to implode, explode, or a little bit of both, but we have everything that's going on in Israel, and we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg here.
Yeah. I mean, we're at the end of the post Cold War era. A lot of the global elite call it the fourth turning point. So it's going to be a very disruptive time because we're going between the way the world used to be to the way the world's is going to be. It's turning out to be, and you've got accelerants like Donald Trump, the advancements in artificial intelligence. You've got the old systems that are starting to fall apart around the world. People are just they can't take the status quo anymore, and things are beginning to change. So it's systemic across the board. So I think 2026 will be a very turbulent year, even more so than 2025.
Wow. Well, I know I'm very interested in what you have in mind, and you were sharing with me some of the things that you see, and they're as always with you, so deep. And I mean that in a good way, because you look beyond what is just surface level and you go into some of the deeper issues. And the first thing you mention is we're going into war plan red style realignment. And I'm an old military man. I know what you're referring to when you say war plan red. But some of our viewers probably, this is a little foreign linguistic for them. So explain what you mean by war plan red and how you see this going to play out in 2026.
Well, War Plan Red was a hypothetical military strategy put forth in the 1920s, positing the idea that the U.S. and the United Kingdom went to war. And what would happen, in the military, they plan for everything. There's always war gaming, every kind of scenario, even at the conventional level, the Army, they war plan everything. So War Plan Red obviously goes back a little over 100 years. But what's interesting about that is that at that time, World War I had just ended and the British were on the decline. The British Empire was on the decline. And they used to say the sun never set on the British Empire, right? And then between World War I and World War II, that really collapsed the global British Empire to the point that most of their colonies were beginning to decolonialize, around the world, from India to, just everywhere. Every place that they had influence and stay, they were losing those places. Even in my lifetime, I saw the Hong Kong being handed back over to the Chinese. I think it was in 1999, or maybe it was right in 2000. But in that time period, there was right after World War II, there was basically the United States was the last man standing in terms of power, prestige, military might, financial strength, etc. And we basically set out to rebuild the world. We had the Marshall Plan to take care of Europe, and the plan to rebuild Japan in the Pacific, as well as all the island chains and stuff that had been destroyed during the wars, and then the military footprint beginning to expand out in the Pacific, places like Guam and Diego Garcia, etc. And then you had the Bretton Woods Agreement, which basically was a kind of a financial status that was going to put the U.S. dollar as the U.S. dollar as a global reserve currency for the world. And from there, we began footing the bill for all sorts of things. Our economy was still thriving, and we were paying for the United Nations. We stood up NATO in 1949, and we were the largest benefactors to NATO. Most of Europe was still in shambles. And in 1960, you got to think about it, how backhanded this is, and I'm not blaming any British person alive today or anything like that. But in 1960, the British set up these secretive financial centers, 14 secretive financial centers that were what we would come to think of today as offshore banking. And you get them in places like the Cayman Islands, Turks and Caicos, Bahamas, Bermuda. Basically any island that was still a territory of a place. Like the Cayman Islands is still British territory. But they set up the offshore banking centers. And that was done through the banks of England and the exchequer there, as well as elites from Europe that basically wanted to create a financial system that was not governed by any sovereign nation. And so over time, that obviously became the go-to bank of choice for tin pot dictators, the cartels, the narco trade, terrorist organizations. And this has been the norm that the world has tolerated for the better part, definitely throughout my lifetime. I'm 50, so 51. And it's always been there. You've always kind of knew that it existed. I never really understood it, but you got to think that offshore banking system exists for a reason. And I think in part it was designed to keep America caged in on a leash, basically doing the bidding of Europe still after all these years and after all we've done to rebuild Europe and everything like that. And I think that that's what Trump is waging war against. It's not necessarily Venezuela per se, even though he does want to stop the flow of drugs into America. In order to do that, you had to take out Maduro, who is the head cartel guy of all the cartels. I mean, he's the kind of the head cheese. And right now, in the offshore banking system that's still controlled largely by England, there's like 50 to 75 trillion dollars that flow through there. Of that is about 350 billion is that like narco terror money. And so when Trump is down there starting to blow up and take aim at these drug boats, and then going down and taking over Maduro, basically embargoing all their oil. Uh, he's not necessarily he's killing two birds with one stone in stopping the flow of drugs, as well as starting to take aim at these offshore banking systems that enable America's enemies to keep running us into the ground. And so that in part ties in with Greenland, ties in with Western Canada. It ties in with this whole idea of the resurgence of the Monroe Doctrine, or the Donroe Doctrine, as he calls it now. I mean, it's all kind of connected. And if you don't understand the way Trump functions, he'll throw something out there and it's like a grenade. It goes off and everybody's reacting and reacting. And then he comes back in a little bit later and then he negotiates some kind of a deal out of that when everybody's kind of spun up or after they've calmed down, or, he's always working people, the whole art of the deal thing. Yeah. And here's the thing though, the status quo, I said at the outset that we were moving into from one world order to the new world order. And Sun Tzu said, thousands of years ago, never fight on the ground prepared by your enemy. And that's what Trump is doing. He is not playing by the liberal rules-based order anymore. He's coloring outside the lines, and he is refusing to play by their rules. And it's throwing all of these guys off their game. So I think, I know a lot of people have angst against Trump. I don't like how he treats Israel. And there's some issues that I have what he does with Israel, but he's also doing some things. It's just fascinating to watch. It's like, believe it or not, I mean, it's like being alive when Lincoln was alive or Washington. I mean, the guy, if we were going to be here for another 50 years, and not that we are, but if we were, he would be one of those iconic figures in history. He would totally eclipse Reagan. I mean, I thought Reagan was the best president we ever had, but then so anyways, I just see what he's doing. I see the game that he's playing at, and he's not playing by their rules anymore. And a lot of the MAGA pit bulls out there, your social media folks, if they don't see somebody being perp walked every 5 minutes, they're calling him a failure, or they're bashing him and all that. I think that judgment day for those people are coming, and this all goes back to 2011. This all started with Obama calling out Trump and roasting Trump at that correspondence dinner in 2011, mocking him, humiliating him there in front of everybody. And Amosa, what's her name? Omarosa?
Amorosa.
Yeah. Omarosa. She was an apprentice lady, right? The black lady?
Right.
She was quoted later saying, and I'm paraphrasing her, she's like, I don't think Barack Obama understands or is prepared to deal with what's coming. He's not prepared for what Trump's going to do to him. Like, he doesn't understand the way that Trump functions. And I think we're starting to finally see all this stuff play out. And I'm not calling it 4D chess or anything like that. I'm just saying that Trump doesn't play like other people. And he is definitely, he's got all cylinders are going right now. He's got Greenland going, Venezuela going, a response to Iran going. He's got the tariffs going. He's got, the turning the nutrition cycle upside down with, he's got everything. He's got everybody running in so many different directions that the press can't keep up with it anymore. And he's playing, he's flooding the flooding the zone right now with everything. So, and he hadn't stopped from day one. So it's going to be an interesting year, 2026.
It's going to be a fascinating year. If what I hear you saying with the war plan red logic is that we're seeing a fracturing in Western alliances now, How do you see this shift the world and move us more prophetically towards what's coming down the line? Are we seeing the formation of the 10 kingdom alignment happening right with this, or what do you think, Pete?
Well, I don't know if this will result exactly in the 10 king alignment, but I do see us breaking up the old world order right now. So we're in the fracturing phase, and it's time that institutions like NATO go the way of the dodo bird. I mean, honestly, NATO should have ended back in 92, right after the Soviet Union collapsed, because that's why NATO existed. It was created to prevent Soviet expansion. And once the Soviet Union collapsed, I mean, that they should have transformed NATO into a kind of a European defense force or something. You know, it should have become something different. And that would have forced the Europeans to basically start buckling down and handling their own security, which means they would have had to start spending money on their own armies. And they were riding free. They didn't care. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, and this whole rules based order, this whole, hey, let's just keep things the way it's going. Sometimes people go along with it, but then there is times when you start to see you can see the matrix glitching, you know. And one of those times for me personally was in Afghanistan. I'm there in 2008, and it's I'm a brigade battle captain at this point. I went over there as a platoon leader. I was there for about 4 months as a platoon leader. Then I got pulled up to brigade. So I'm sitting up there 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week, 7 months in a row. Like I didn't have any like one day off that whole time. And where I'm watching operation after operation after operation, and I've got all the TVs on the screen, and I'm the night battle captain, and then we had a day battle captain. So there was only two of us. And I would have General Milley come sit next to me. And at the time, he was a 1-star. He was cool back then. He hadn't been, didn't turn into a swamp rat yet. But we'd watch these air assault operations going down. But I got to thinking, I got to read some articles from retired generals and others. And during that time period, I'm thinking like, okay, we know that the Taliban is being funded by their opium crops. I'm like, why are we destroying the opium crops? Like, why don't we stop? If we took out their money, they wouldn't have the ability to pay anybody. They would have to go back to subsistence farming or whatever. They would have to just go back to eking out a living, but we never destroyed their crops. And that always puzzled me. Like, I thought we were trying to win this war. What are we trying to do here? And so that got me thinking back then that things are not what they seem, you know. And I have an international relations degree, and I minored in military history and Russian. And I just feel like, and a lot of my studies were in Asian history, believe it or not. But like I've seen so much bizarreness in the world, so many things that don't make sense. Like even thinking about offshore banking. I don't have any money in offshore banking. I don't deal with any of that stuff. So I don't think about it. But it's been there since 1960. But why does it exist? And who benefits from it? And who's allowing offshore banking, which is handling, if the world was serious about getting rid of narco-terrorism and terrorism in general and these dictators, why don't we shut that down? Because then those guys wouldn't have anywhere to bank at to move money around and stuff. And so that's what Trump is. He is taking aim at this, and thankfully somebody's doing it. I mean, no president before him no president has ever put this in their crosshairs. So it's going to be a pretty chaotic year, I think.
And perhaps that's why the left is so comfortable with identifying these boats that are trafficking drugs into the United States as is trying to sympathize them as fishing boats instead of calling them out for what they are. Moving on, we could talk about that all night. I mean, just a fascinating topic, and I feel like I've just touched the tip of the iceberg with you on it. We've got 9 other things to get through, and I want to keep moving. Number 2 for me is the exploding global anti-Semitism. And at the end of 2025, we saw the Bondi Beach attack in Australia. Right after that, we had a person that sympathizes with the global infantata put his hand on the Quran and swear himself in as the mayor of one of the largest cities. I often point out that New York City has a police force larger than most armies in the world, and he is now the commander-in-chief of New York City. Some people think he's a joke. I do not take him lightly. I think he's going to leverage a lot, and we're already seeing some of that rhetoric come into play. But then not too long after that, we had a 19-year-old down in Jackson, Mississippi, who torched a synagogue, one of the oldest synagogues in Mississippi, used the expression, well, he did it for Jesus to combat the synagogue of Satan. And just when you think the narrative would start to maybe slow down, it amps up with the Jews. And our friend Olivier likes to say, no Jews, no news. And here we are, 2026. I think we're going to see a continual uprising, a normalization in culture, academia, politics, and especially in segments of the church that are going to drive anti-Semitism further in the news cycle and culture. And it's going to confirm Israel's central role in end times conflict and spiritual warfare. What do you think, Pete?
Well, what's fascinating to me is right as this anti-Semitism is ramping up everywhere in the world, you've got Iranians and Jews coming together in protests and parades.
Yes. And it doesn't make the headlines, does it?
Yeah, waving the Persian flag and then also waving the Star of David, so the Israeli flag. It blows my mind that you can see the hypocrisy on the left and the hypocrisy even within the anti-Semitic evangelical sections of the church and the conservative right that are all about the Palestinians or all, they're just spitting this narrative left and right. But then you see them with the Iranians, and they're just silent as a grave on that. They won't say anything. You can't get them to comment about that. So it exposes the hypocrisy. And honestly, man, the synagogue of Satan to me is not even the Jews. It's going to be. I think that in Revelation 2 and 3, because Jesus is addressing the churches, he's talking about the Christians that have bought in. In the first century, I believe he was talking about the Judaizers that were trying to convert the newly found Christians back into the law. And then I think in the second iteration of it, it's dealing with the replacement theology folks. And that's a wide swath of Christendom that he's talking about, because you've got the Catholic Church that's embraced replacement theology. Post-millennialism is increasingly embracing replacement theology or supersessionism. And then you've got the Mormon Church and the Jehovah's Witnesses and all these different groups that think that basically they're the new chosen people or whatever. I mean, Israel's the only nation in the history of mankind that God is personally covenanted with. That's it. And it's up to God, and that's his nation. And anybody that messes with them touches the apple of God's eyes, it says in Zechariah 2:8. So that's when I go back to Trump, I think, dude, you're treading on very shaky ground when you start messing with Israel, dictating to Israel like you can annex Judea and Samaria, places like that. So, anyways, I digress. I'll keep going on that for another.
Well, you and I both stand very strongly in support of Israel, and as the church, as everyone in the church should. But taking this back a little further, no matter who Jesus in Revelation chapter 2, verse 9, and Revelation chapter 3, verse 9 is identified, or who we want to identify as the church of Satan, nowhere does it justify violence or taking things into hands the way this young man did. Obviously, he wanted to cause harm. It would be a property or personal. He thinks he's doing justice. And what I think is important is the church should not remain silent. This is an opportunity to continue to build bridges with our Jewish neighbors, and for pastors just to take a moment during their Sunday and say, this was wrong. And we do not support this, we do not condone this, and we support Israel. But sadly, churches remain silent. Pulpits remain apathetic to what's going on with our brothers in Israel. It just fuels the narrative with the Jewish community that Christians really are their enemy. We're going to go on because number 3, you talk about the collapse of Cuba and Mexican cartels. We hit on this a little bit with Venezuela. Do you think we're going to see a complete collapse, or is it going to be how is this going to play out?
Well, Cuba was wholly dependent upon Venezuelan oil for it was their lifeline to basically to the world. And once Trump cut that off, removed Maduro, and now is going to stop all shipment of oil to Cuba, which was already barely squeaking by. I mean, they were barely making it. And I know some people that have gone down there a bunch of times, and I mean, you could barely get enough gas for your motorcycle or moped, and not even a full tank. I mean, they ration everything. So I think that within the year they will collapse. There will be a regime change there, and the whatever. It's not even the Castro anymore. I thought Raul Castro was still in charge, but apparently he died at some point, maybe a couple of years ago or a year ago. And whoever the new president is, I mean, he's in no position to deal with Trump. I mean, you saw how much trash the Colombian president Gustavo Petro was talking, and as soon as Trump turned his sights onto him, man, he called him, and he just said, "Hey, no mas, no mas," and basically he's going up there next week to like kiss the ring, and he's going to toe the line too. So I don't think Cuba's long for this world. The Cuban regime is long for this world. So Marco Rubio's parents are both Cuban exiles, so I know that this issue is very near and dear to his heart, and he's not going to let this go while he's in the position to make a difference. You can't tell me that you're the son of an exile from a country that had a military communist revolution. Your parents lost everything, and now you're like the second most powerful person in the world, and you're not going to take it. You're not going to do something about that. Nah.
Is that Miguel Diaz Canel? Is that his name?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, who knows? Who
Okay.
cares? I mean, he's going to be there for like 5 seconds anyways. But
right.
Between that, I mean, Cuba will change out. And then we're looking at Gloria Sheinbaum. She is terrified of the cartels. And so once Trump turns the military loose on taking out the cartels, he's got the southern border blockaded. He's going to stop the shipment of drugs from South America up to the cartels. That's going to force the cartels to look to China, and we'll probably ramp up the anti-drug operations off the coast, in the Pacific. So eventually the cartel is going to just run out of things to ship other than, they had been trafficking humans and children and women and drugs were the three big things. And now those are all being shut off. So I don't know how much longer they've got to last. So Mexico may take a little longer than Cuba, but I see both of those as, Cuba for sure this year, Mexico probably on the brink at some point this year. And it may look like, and it depends, it also depends on how much military cooperation the Mexican government allows the U.S. to participate. If we do joint missions together and we start targeting these cartels, taking them out, and doing systemic changes to their economy, so they don't ever have to go back to this, it could benefit both countries. But I do see both major changes in both countries this year for them.
Do you think the destabilization of these cartels, especially in Cuba and Mexico, is that going to lead to more of a destabilization in the Western Hemisphere? Do you think we're going to see powerful people in the West that are going to come out as criminal actors in all this? What's your take? How do you think this is going to play out in 2026?
Well, I mean, there was a Venezuelan intelligence officer, a very high up intelligence officer that was one of the key figures in the 2020 election and the whole Dominion voting machines and all that stuff. So that's what the system they had been using to keep Maduro in power. So he's named a bunch of names, both Republican and Democrats. I think that Trump, starting back with Crossfire Hurricane, the original scandal that they tried to pin him with in 2015, 2016, I think that everybody involved from that going forward, and people that are on the take from these cartels, that are on the take from Maduro or from the Colombian president, or any of those countries, they're going to get exposed. So it could be turbulent in American politics for sure, but we also know the cartel has strongholds here in the United States. So part of what ICE is doing is not only getting rid of the Venezuelan gangs like Tren de Aragua or MS-13 or many other of the gangs. They're also going after the cartels that are embedded in places like Chicago and a lot of these sanctuary cities where they've been able to set up, their organizational structures. So it's going to be a chaotic year in the United States too. We're seeing a glimpse of that in Minnesota, and these deep blue states. And even Minnesota is not deep blue. It's just like Minneapolis. It's the urban centers that have become sanctuary cities, that the Democrats are so desperate to hold on to these sanctuary cities because they are losing their base. They're losing the Hispanics, and they've lost the African American community, the Black community. So, or they're losing them in droves. So, who they have to import their new next generation of voters. So, and give them all the fraud, like the Somalis, and give them all the fraud they can handle, so they keep voting, keeping them in power. So, the U.S., I think the blue states are going to be very turbulent this year across the U.S., where we're starting to see the dismantlement of all these old systems that had benefited these criminal actors for so long.
It'll be fascinating to watch, especially as we come into the midterms, how this plays out. I have as number 4 the increased deception across culture and media. I think in 2026, because of these things we're talking about, we're going to see a dramatic rise in deception, and AI is going to play a major role in that too. We're going from misinformation to an organized narrative to control the media. And we know Operation Mockingbird has been in play and is still in play on many levels. This is going to take a whole new meaning as we get into 2026, as we start really ramping up into the midterms. We're seeing all these things take place. We see President Trump going off the norm doctrine of how things are handled and what the world is doing. Anti-Semitism is rising and so on. And I think we're going to see a level of control and manipulation in our world that we've never seen before. And really, you're almost going to need discernment from the Holy Spirit to really see what's going on today. Going back to AI, and we're going to talk about AI here in a little bit, but AI, in the short time that it's really become central into our society, AI has really grown significantly in its ability to create video and images and stuff. You know, it used to be a year ago, we'd be talking about, oh, well, you can put 6 fingers on somebody, or 3 hands or whatever, and you could easily spot AI images. That's not as easy anymore. And the same thing with videos.
No.
Where do you see, what do you think is going to be some of the chaos created by this deceptiveness in the media today?
Well, you mentioned Mockingbird, and we already knew the propaganda existed in the media long before AI came along. So it's not going to be much longer before the powers that be are going to start using this deepfake technology to shape people's opinions of things. Imagine if they came out with an image of Trump, doing whatever with Epstein, or of some really scandalous image of somebody famous. I mean, by the time that it's revealed that it's fake, I mean, the damage is kind of done. You know what I mean? Like, it can be very, very damaging to people's careers and to their livelihoods. And I know the Hollywood is already freaking out about it, because you can go onto a movie generator thing and say, hey, I want to make Lord of the Rings, but I want all the actors to be the actors from Star Wars, or whatever. You can do all sorts of things, write whole movies that are pretty impressive. And Hollywood, or make trailers, for example. I mean, Hollywood is already freaking out about this, so they're trying to pressure these AI generating companies to shut the accounts down. So I think that because AI is going to become so problematic as it goes forward in terms of just being available to the general population, that's why they're pushing so hard for all this digital ID stuff. They want to be able to tie your activity online to a name and a face and an address. And I mean, that's, in my opinion, that's part of why they're pushing so hard for this, because the AI is getting so powerful. But AI is also being incorporated into a lot of government systems, military systems, financial systems.
President Trump rolled out, Operation
Stargate.
Genesis, and Stargate, and so on. And Jesus continually warned in his Olivet Discourse to his disciples, "Watch out, no one deceives you. For many are going to come and say, 'I am Messiah,' and will deceive many." And I know he was addressing a Jewish audience, but when he's talking about this, but as believers today, we should heed all the more the message, and to make sure that we hold fast to the truth. I encourage my church members to make sure they have paper copy Bible, because a lot of people depend upon tablets or phones to find scripture, and how quick those could be changed, and maybe deceptively so. It'll be curious to see how fast things change, and we're going to talk about AI in a minute. You also mentioned, as we going back to geopolitical shifts, you said that there's going to be a dismantling of the imperial English financial empire. Why don't you explain that a little bit?
Well, it's kind of like what I was talking about at the beginning with the offshore banking. And so as Trump begins to dismantle he's waging war on this system. We're just seeing kind of the end effects of it. But behind the scenes, you've got Scott Bessent and the rest of his financial team going after the power structure of the rules-based order, which is largely led by England, by London. And, London as well as Brussels with the EU, they want to keep things at the status quo. But at the same time, they're rigging the game so that America is always kind of on the losing end of everything. And these rules-based order world that we live in is largely designed to cage the United States. It's designed to suppress the United States from exercising its power as a superpower, its authority as a superpower. And we've been, largely good-natured people about this whole thing, but I think all of that's changed because of just how we're starting to see how rigged and how unfair this system is, and how it's causing us to get sucked into these, 20-year wars, or, we're just constantly being having DEI and multiculturalism crammed down our throat. We're seeing it on steroids in England right now with Starmer in charge. And, I wouldn't be surprised if they have some type of I don't want to say a civil war, but definitely some kind of an uprising there this year. I thought it would happen last year, but it got close. It got close in the death of that little Irish girl that was killed by an immigrant. So I think that the old world order, led by England, led by London, the financial centers in London and in Europe, that stuff is going to be starting to come apart. At the same time that the U.S. is ascending, I think the rapture could happen at any moment. So imagine the kind of power vacuum that would create in the world with the rapture suddenly hitting the world, upside the head, and all of a sudden, millions of people are gone, and the U.S. now, which was on the ascent, is now going to be teetering at the top. If you've got Christians inside of Trump's administration, they're going to be gone. And, not only that, but across the military, across the corporate world, the blue collar world, everywhere, it's going to impact. And I think that that ultimately what comes out of this, this attempt to overthrow the British imperial system that had dominated the world for like the last 3 centuries, I think that that's going to unravel in the light of the rapture and in light of the collapse of the United States. And then that's what comes out of this, is the kind of the 10 kings system. And it may be ruled by technocrats. It may be just divided up regionally into like these imperial regions. But I definitely see Europe still maintaining control of that, because we're still in the long legs of Rome, the long legs of Daniel's or Nebuchadnezzar's statue. We're still in those legs. And, what's coming out of it is this very fractious, the feet and the toes. So we might be in the cankles right now. we're definitely like in the legs and the ankles. So.
Excellent. Well, it's going to be fascinating to watch how this continues to play out this year in 2026. Shifting over to the Middle East, we're going to talk about Iran for a minute. And right now, as you and I are recording this, there are massive protests happening all throughout Iran. There are reports of over 20,000 people that have been killed. That number is still a little ambiguous because of communication lockdowns and so on. The U.S. is posturing, at least, for some kind of military action. Iran is a player in the end times. In Bible prophecy, we see Iran as Elam, as Persia, is going to be one of the nations involved in Gog and Magog. But right now, we're watching a possible collapse, I would say, of the Ayatollah. That would be, in a lot of good ways, good. We certainly, the Ayatollahs are a very evil group, and it'd be curious to see if the Shah is able to get back in power, that we're able to restore some kind of democracy or republic in there. How do you think the shift in Iran is going to affect 2026?
Well, I mean, the Khomeini is 86, so I don't really see him lasting the year, living. Uh, I think what may transpire, and this, if by the time this airs, this may be old news at this point. But I don't really think he'll leave Iran, but his son might leave, who was supposed to be the heir apparent. But he may end up going to some kind of a bunker system, hiding out wherever his secret hidey hole place is, and the U.S. goes in there and turns that into a giant gaping hole in the earth, just like they did with Nasrallah and with the Operation Midnight Hammer. So there's that potential too, that we just take out Khomeini. Now, whether Iran becomes a stable monarchy under the Shah Pahlavi, or one of the IRGC generals takes over and it becomes some type of a military regime, it's anyone's guess at this point right now. But like you said, I mean, they are involved in Gog and Magog, so something changes between them. And I mentioned earlier how they're waving, the Iranian flag as well as the Israeli flag together in a lot of places, that they're standing together. At some point, this may lead to, though, it may lead to this false peace that Israel kind of succumbs to right at the outset of Gog and Magog. And it also may be that a lot of the forces that march against Israel in Gog and Magog, they're coming from all different directions. They're coming from the east, the west, the north, the south, and they're both Sunni and Shia. I mean, modern day Iran, might be a staging ground for a lot of these groups moving forward. Just like when you look at a country that gets destabilized by conflict, like Afghanistan, for example, decades and decades of fighting just left that place a lawless area, and that allowed for the Taliban to rise up and take hold, right? And then ISIS went there, hiding out, and Al Qaeda, then ISIS. So, it may be that Iran is a kind of neutered on the global stage, but it also may be setting itself up for a staging ground for a lot of the Muslims coming out of the former Soviet satellite states, like Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kurdistan. All of those places could be, assembling. Satan's going to be rallying these forces to come march against Israel, and that may be the staging ground they stay at between there and Iraq. And Iraq is still largely pretty lawless right now. So with the exception of the Kurdish North, that's kind of how I see it. And even if the Shah does take over, I mean, it would take decades for them to really kind of rebuild the nation, at least a decade to rebuild it back to the way it was prior to the 1979 overthrow, when the Khomeini took over. So it could be 10, 15 years before that gets back to it. And so in the meantime, I think Iran is still going to largely be destabilized because of all of the decades of mismanagement. They've mismanaged their water. They've let their infrastructure atrophy. I mean, they're in a bad way. If they didn't have oil, I mean, that was kind of the lifeline. But since that's been for years now,
They were
But
days.
yeah.
I know Tehran was days away from, being dry water-wise. That their reservoirs were down below 10%. The interesting thing about Iran is how quickly the landscape changes, and I believe Khamenei he's a caged lion backed into a corner now. I know people are saying he's preparing to flee to Russia. Maybe that becomes the case, but really I see him. His pride is going to be, and his belief that he is so God driven that he may resort to attack on Israel or something in retaliation. Meanwhile, though, he's got a huge problem with the number of people that are rising up and continuing to rise up. He's doing everything he can to stop this. I know they were firing rubber bullets in their eyes to try to blind them. They have abducted doctors in the hospitals that treated protesters. By the time this airs, this may be a completely different story, but I believe Iran in 2026 is going to be one of the headlines that we got to keep watching. Next, you mentioned Musk and XAI, the Tesla 1.5 trillion space energy tech convergence. Musk is now ready to launch satellites that are solar powered into orbit that are going to be AI generated. He's got so many things happening tech wise with AI, with neuro implants and social media. This all is converging together. A major leap forward in private sector technological infrastructure involving AI, energy, space systems is shaping the global power of economics and surveillance capabilities. What are you seeing happening with this as well?
Okay, so Elon came out the other day and said that we're already in the singularity, and I don't know why he's saying that. I tried to listen to an interview with him explain it, but here's the thing too, though. I mean, you mentioned all his companies. I mean, every one of his companies is designed to get humans off planet, and I think in total, all of his companies together are worth somewhere between 1.96 to 2.13 trillion dollars. By far the wealthiest man on the planet, and his money is about to double, I think, because he's starting to try to harvest the power of the sun in all of these Starlink satellites that he shoots up. He's the only guy that has a reusable rocket that can launch this stuff up, and he's got somewhere in the neighborhood of like 9,000 satellites up in space right now. If he can own the biggest hindrance right now, the thing slowing down AI is the energy consumption that these massive data farms need. These data centers need incredible amounts of energy and water and resources. So moving them off planet in terms of keeping the systems to the right temperature they got to be at, keeping them cool, which is something that is a big energy draw here in the at least on Earth. Moving them off planet answers the cooling question, and secondly, the power question. You live on the earth here, you might get 8 to 10 hours of sunlight during the day, on a kind of a normal day, and then you get the other 12 hours is dark, and then you have the days that you do have sunlight, maybe it's cloud cover, etc. So if you're depending on solar energy for anything, it's kind of hit or miss unless you live out in the desert somewhere. But with having the satellites that are capturing the solar radiation and everything from out of out in the exosphere, they are he is going to own the energy race, and every other company that needs AI or that's doing AI, whether it's Google, Amazon, the Chinese, anybody that's needing energy, the kind of energy that they're going to need for these data centers, they're going to have to go through him. He's not racing everybody on this track. He owns the track. He owns it all. And so I don't know if he's one of the 10 kings, but if he's not, he should be, because he's definitely positioning himself to basically own all of this stuff. And the other day I was reading that the Hyundai factory in the U.S. has already got these Atlas robots working in their production. So, I mean, robots is going to become a thing. These things are going to be embedded with, I think they're embedded with Google's DeepMind AI. So the AI race is the new quantum, or is the new arms race of the 21st century. That and quantum supremacy. So Elon's not that invested in quantum energy, or quantum computing, but quantum is going to be another game changer. So yeah, and I just see 2026. Whatever we thought AI was doing in 2025 was amazing. 2026 is going to surpass that or double that. So just think about the things in the last year. Just you know consider that twice over, and you're probably going to get a good glimpse of 2026.
And AI is our number 8 for 2026. So it's a great segue. I don't think most people are prepared for the changes that are going to be coming through AI. And what's been fascinating me lately, because I've studied a lot of psychology and stuff, is there is an emerging diagnosis in the psychological world called AI psychosis, where people are having psychotic episodes because of their interaction with chatbots, and people are having complete breakdowns because they're allowing AI influence to shift their lives to where people are having messiah complexes. They're having all these things. One guy was talking about how he was beginning to believe he was an AI machine. He was a computer, and that AI was influencing him. And so we're not ready, I don't think, psychologically, culturally, and just generally for what's coming with artificial intelligence. It's like we're the mouse that have built our own mousetrap. And AI is going to move from just a tool or a glorified Google to a shaped decision-making behavior, where everything from finance to warfare to the very understanding of truth itself is going to be monitored, modified, and designed by artificial intelligence. Another thing that we've been seeing there was some congressional testimony at the end of 2025, was teenagers, young minds who are not really able to understand or discern what's being told by AI, and the level of teenage suicides that are being driven by these chatbots. So we have so much happening at a rate that I don't think most people in culture are going to be able to keep up with. And what I see is a formulation, a structure, a framework being put together for the beast system when the Antichrist emerges. What do you think is going to happen with AI?
Well, I think in terms of economically, technology is going to do like AI will do to a lot of segments of society what like email did to the postal system. In terms of uh, basically making it irrelevant unless you're shipping a package. I mean, how many letters do you sit and write anymore when you can just shoot off an email? I mean, I sent out Christmas cards this year. It was the first time in uh, I don't even know how many years it's been, and I just intentionally did it because I was like, you know what, I haven't written a card in forever. I need to do it this year. So, this kind of the way that AI is going to be moving into the economy is going to be very transformative, and it's going to be very disruptive to a lot of different types of sectors of jobs. Basically, any job that requires you to sit at a computer and compute data or do some type of analysis or whatever, that can already be done many times over by AI, and so that's going to have a huge impact on the economy and the jobs market. And then when you look at what it's doing to young people and their ability to comprehend, information or process information, it is vastly dumbing people down because you don't have to read anymore. And reading is, you know, it's fundamental to how your brain functions, like how the wires are starting to form inside of your brain, the networks in your brain that gets formed, the neurons. And so when everything is just fed to you in a visual image, you're not getting the same kind of stimuli that you would get when you have to read a word and then make a word picture in your mind to kind of correspond to what you're reading. And so you have all of that, plus the psychosis you mentioned, people not being able to pull themselves out of the matrix, as it were. And it's setting the world up in a very dangerous and precarious way. And it's ironic to me that at the time when mankind becomes the most technologically advanced is also the time that we're also the most morally depraved. So you put that on that factor in there. Uh, People are start marrying these AI bots. And I don't mean the computer systems. I mean like the actual like Android, the full bodied machine things with human looking skin. That's all starting to happen. It's gonna escalate exponentially as we move into 2026. So I don't see that slowing down. It's just going to be increasingly more problematic for people to live in a very modernized world that is also bankrupt from godly discernment and wisdom.
I have a 10-year-old son, and I'm watching him be shaped by culture and by his world as he's experiencing his world. And there's so much he's trying to comprehend and to understand, as be it just being social with his friends, or understanding math equations, simple, multiplication, division, or so on. But his mind is being shaped in a very distinct way. We limit the amount of exposure he has to media. When you add this influence into a developing mind, we really don't know what this is going to do. If we're here 10 years, we'll be looking back at this thinking, wow, that was a huge mistake. Now we have to reap the consequences. Thinking into a teenage mind or a young adult mind, they are really starting to shift and shape their worldview and try to really solidify their identity. And just the amount of deception that's being associated with AI, and we're talking about AI psychosis, and that's just with just the fresh rolling out of AI into our culture. We're opening up a Pandora's box. You write down for number 9, UAP UFO narrative shift from disclosure to confirmation. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I think this whole topic about UFOs and now UAP, or even underwater anomalous phenomena. So you've got the underwater, you've got the unidentified aerial phenomena, USO. That's what I was thinking, or USP. I don't know. There's so many different acronyms now out for it. I think that disclosure is still going to be on the top of a lot of people's minds, even people in Congress. I think if any president were going to confirm or do some type of confirmation of what we really know and what we really are dealing with, it would be a guy like President Trump. Um, and like I said, he's a disruptor. So I mean, if this is one of the strangleholds that this knowledge embargo that the deep state and the intelligence groups have held over Americans for the last 70 years, it's going to come to light. So I do think there'll be some type of major disclosure issue this year, and it may come on the heels of a major event that happens. Remember back in the beginning of 2025, even the end of 2024, we had all these strange drones and then orbs appearing all over, like New Jersey and all over the U.S. and England and other places. We could have another event like that, a rash of these things happening, and that just kind of pushes it forward to the point that finally they come out and say, "Hey, we know what this is," or we here's what we have. And so I do think there'll be some type of, each year it seems like we're getting more and more disclosure, and that embargo is lifting in terms of what the general population knows. So I think that this is going to kind of reach fever pitch this summer. Sometime around the summer, it'll kind of reach a fever pitch. Right around the time Spielberg comes out with his movie Disclosure Day, that'll probably be some type of. What's fascinating about the Disclosure Day, even if you watch the trailer, and I think Lee and I did a video on this not too long ago. Lee Brainerd. In the trailer, the guy's got a flip phone, and somebody that was looking at it very closely, everybody just assumed that they were referring back to an earlier time. And no, it's a kosher phone. It's a kosher phone. It's a phone that has the camera taken off of it. It doesn't connect to the internet. So it's some type of a Jewish, Israeli kosher phone. And then they mentioned the fact that there's 7 billion people on the planet. So where did the other billion people go? They were thinking maybe flashback to like the 20 teens, And no, that phone only came out in 2023. So, could be timing it with, a possible rapture event. I mean, we don't know. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out. But I do think that we're going to see way more in 2026 than we saw in 2025.
It is interesting how much pre-programming we find with Hollywood, and I'll be curious to see what happens. And we definitely do see an increase in interest in this. What the government releases and what truth is going to be a fascinating time to watch. As we close this out, we have one more, and that is the increased apostasy that's growing in the church. We have pundits like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson that are influencing evangelical circles. What we're watching happen in the church today is nothing short of mind-boggling, other than this is what Paul was talking about when he says that in the last days, people will be giving over to doctrines of demons. Where do you see, and let me, before I ask the question, I'm watching in my own church, and I've talked to other pastors who have sat and we've taught steadfastly under the whole counsel of God, dividing scripture properly. And we're watching church members fragment, and we're watching people break unity with church over issues like Israel, over issues like end times theology, and so on. What's going to happen in 2026 with the church?
Well, I was on Substack, and I know you're on Substack as well. And I was looking at the faith and spirituality list. And I mean, I don't know about you, I think overwhelmingly it's full of spiritually bankrupt mouthpieces out there that are not discerning. They're just kind of preaching the whole Joel Osteen type of, be your best you now. And it's all like kind of self-help, pump you up type of faith, spirituality or whatever. And that's like the number, really the top 20, I think maybe Prophecy Watchers is in there somewhere. But other than that, I mean, it's just like all this garbage that's out there. And then you go on X, and on my X feed, it's all Mormons. And then you go to, around the town you live in or wherever you're at, you've got, 50 different kinds of churches, and the church is so fragmented today, more than it's ever been in the history of the church. And I think it's just like what, I hold to the position that the 7 letters speaks to the 7 kind of stages of the church age. I mean, all 7 are real churches in John's day, 95 AD, and we've all seen flavors of them throughout the years. But whatever church is the most dominant is the era, the era of the church of that era. And I think we're in the Laodicean era, and that word Laodicea means the people rule. And, the people are just going to do what they want to do. And that's the same thing that Paul says, is that, in the last days, people are not going to listen to sound doctrine. They're going to want to have their ears tickled. And they're just going to go listen to whoever kind of scratches that itch for them. And unfortunately, most of the churches today, and I'd say probably about 80%, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong on this, but about 80% of the churches today don't teach on anything prophecy. Maybe 70%, but it's a pretty high percentage. Very few churches are still like teaching through the whole Bible.
I think it's 1 in 9 churches now are teaching end times prophecy, which makes up 30% of the Bible, almost 30% of the Bible. We're reaping the harvest of a church growth mindset where we have commercialized church, we have commercialized spirituality, and we've commercialized Christianity to become a consumer-based commodity rather than a necessity. And Jesus says, "I'm the bread of life." And what he's talking about is he's talking about the very word that God gave us. And we hold this book not because if this book was written by man, we did a very poor job of glorifying ourselves through it, because it doesn't say very much good things about the heart of man. But it does give us the hope for our heart, right? And so this is why we hold so closely to this. And as the church departs further and further from the word, then we find ourselves being able to go after whatever we want. I guess my encouragement as we close this out is we need to get back to the word. We need to stand upon that word, be once again the pillar of buttress of truth. Pete, it's been a fantastic conversation. And as always, you've set the bar higher with what we've talked about. I'm looking forward to this again sometime. We'll maybe revisit again in a couple months and see how 2026 is progressing. Before we close out, where can people find you? How can people get a hold of you or follow you, hear more about what you're teaching?
Well, I'm on obviously Facebook and Instagram, just Rev310. And then on Telegram, it's Rev310, YouTube, Rev310, or they can put in Pete Garcia. It should pull me up either way. And then Substack is Rev310. I think it's, I don't know the full address yet. It's like rev310.substack.com or whatever that is. So those are the kind of the ways people can follow me. And I've been putting out about an article a week, but I've got a couple of guys that still write for me and contribute to the website. So if you're interested in calendars, timing, and Randy Nettles does an amazing job deep diving into the different calendar systems and God's timing. And it's way over my head. But anyways, just it's good stuff. We gotta keep the intellectual juices flowing. So get you thinking about stuff.
Keep up the good work. Keep writing. Keep speaking. And we'll look forward to seeing you again real soon. Thanks for being on today, and we'll look forward to another time to get together in the near future.
All right. Sounds great, Brad. Thanks.
God bless.
Well, I'm on obviously Facebook and Instagram, just Rev310. And then on Telegram, it's Rev310, YouTube, Rev310, or they can put in Pete Garcia. It should pull me up either way. And then Substack is Rev310. I think it's, I don't know the full address yet. It's like rev310.substack.com or whatever that is. So those are the kind of the ways people can follow me. And I've been putting out about an article a week, but I've got a couple of guys that still write for me and contribute to the website. So if you're interested in calendars, timing, and Randy Nettles does an amazing job deep diving into the different calendar systems and God's timing. And it's way over my head. But anyways, just it's good stuff. We gotta keep the intellectual juices flowing. So get you thinking about stuff.
Keep up the good work. Keep writing. Keep speaking, and we'll look forward to seeing you again real soon. Thanks for being on today, and we'll look forward to another time to get together in the near future.
All right. Sounds great, Brad. Thanks.
God bless.